Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Sunday, April 7th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game in 146 days. The game against Michigan in 237 days. It is hard to believe, but 1 week from right now, the Ohio State spring game is going to be over, and we're going to be heading into the full-blown off-season. No more spring ball, just long summer before the start of fall camp in August. So, while we're heading into that final week of spring ball for the Buckeyes, I'm going to let you hear from one of the coaches we got to talk to this week, and this is someone who, obviously a fan favorite of Ohio State fans as a player, James Laurinaitis, also now turning into quite a fan favorite as a coach as well. So a favorite of the media because he's got a lot of interesting things to say and sort of a very unique perspective on the business of Ohio State football from the role from being a player to then a grad assistant and now a full-time assistant coach. So let's start with some of the stuff that we've gotten to see a little bit of this spring. It feels like the defense has been a little more aggressive. We saw a lot of blitzing during the student appreciation practice last Saturday. Is that something that we can look for more this fall from guys like CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles? You're also going to hear a quick follow-up question here as well.
We had a lot of pressures in last year as well. We didn't really need to maybe use them as much as the year before. But we repped them in practice, and I think it's something that when you're going to be aggressive on defense, a lot of times in spring you're always trying new stuff out and fine-tuning the stuff that you did the year before and all that. So we have some very talented athletes that can blitz. That's one of CJ's strong suits. Sonny's gotten
on the goal line.
Sonny's gotten much better at blitzing this spring, and so I think you just got to try to utilize what your guys do well.
Better how? Just like timing of things, like what goes into it?
Timing. I mean, I think a lot of it is just confidence. Like for Sonny, it's just telling him don't think. When you're going, you just got to make something happen. You can't really think too much about it. When you have that kind of athleticism, him, CJ, Arvell, you just got to go. I think sometimes you try to be so perfect with what the move is. When you just go with speed and let your natural athleticism take over, then you're deadly.
We always get a lot of questions about those two guys we talked about earlier, Sonny Styles, CJ Hicks. Let's talk about both of them real quickly right now. Sonny Styles, how has that switch from safety to linebacker gone so far for him?
I mean, I think Sonny's made a really smooth transition to linebacker. The early days you had to work on. Luke Fickle used to say this to us all the time. He'd say, "Be slow until it's time to be fast in the box." And what that means is you have to have calm feet. And he's so used to breaking and going from safety, you had to slow him down. He's so explosive. And so he's really gotten his footwork under control. It's a never-ending process. But for a guy that played, and look, I think playing at safety, seeing the game from that perspective, now moving up, he has a good idea of the whole scheme and how everything kind of works together. So it's been a really smooth transition for Sonny.
And what about CJ Hicks? He came out of high school as a 5-star linebacker prospect and has not played a ton on defense the first 2 years. I think there's sort of this feeling that he's behind, and I definitely don't think he's behind. This is a time when Tommy Eichenberg, Steele Chambers now both off to the NFL, and now is kind of the time when you'd expect maybe he's going to take that next step and take on a bigger role this fall. So how has CJ Hicks grown since the end of last season?
I think so. I think CJ Hicks has done a phenomenal job. You got to keep pressing him and making sure that he's really tapping into everything that he can offer. I think CJ sees the opportunity, and he's certainly making a case to get on the field this fall. So I think it's been a really good spring for CJ. There's just always, whenever you have a good day, you got to follow it up by another good day, and kind of stack days. And I think that's what a pro does. You know what I mean? Like there's always, if you want to be a pro, you got to keep stacking them. That's the expectation. And I think, he's had some really good days, and then he's had some days where you're trying to push him a little bit. But I think CJ, where he is now compared to where he was last fall, is he's a lot better football player.
It feels like a lot of the conversation around the linebackers is centered around Cody Simon and CJ Hicks and Sonny Styles, and maybe to a lesser extent, Gabe Powers as well. But there's even other talented players in that linebacker room as well. And with the potential for a 16-game season, or maybe even more than that this fall, it sounds like Laurinaitis feels like they may have to play a bunch of them and need a bunch of them to be ready to play this fall.
Yeah, well, I think Coach Day's talked about it a lot, right? It's going to be a long season. And so I think we need to have – I've always been of the opinion, if you have two guys, you have two guys, and you ride with them, right? If you have six, you have six, and that's a blessing. So I'd say right now we're probably at 5. that I would feel confident rotating out there on the field. And look, I'm old school, right? So I come from the era, I used to yell at Luke Fickell when he would take me out. Oh, I'd get so mad. It'd be 42 whatever against Youngstown State, and I'd be so upset coming out of the game. But seeing how violent this game is from this perspective, now you have to say, hey, okay, not only within games can we keep guys fresh, right? But can we do that so that when you get to the last few games of the season that are the big ones, right, the ones that you're judged off of, when you get to the game, are we healthier? And I think it's kind of a both and, right? So I feel confident with 5 guys, and that's going to be week to week. You know what I mean? Like, these guys know, I think, honestly, who starts should be week to week. If you display during the week of practice that you're locked in and somebody else has a bad mental week, well, I can't reward you with starting if you have 6 mental errors during the week, you know what I mean, just because you started last week. So I think it's got to be that iron sharpens iron, constant competition through the whole fall.
It's easy to forget this now after he was a multiple-time All-American at Ohio State and an 8-year pro in the NFL, but James Laurinaitis was just a very unheralded 3-star recruit coming out of Minnesota in high school, and he knows what it's like to look over your shoulder wondering whether you're going to get to keep your job at a place like Ohio State. And honestly, he thinks that's actually a positive.
I always felt when I was here that they were trying to out-recruit me, which is the reality, right? Which is why it prepares you so well for the National Football League. That's why Ohio State prepares you so well for the league, because now it's like they're trying to out-draft you. And so I use that as fuel, but I also saw it firsthand. You know, like, there was a season where it was John Kerr, Marcus Freeman, certain guys rotating week to week. And so I saw, like, shoot, if it can happen to them, it can happen to me. So I just tried to be a certain way in practice. Like, I tell the guys all the time, you have to control the things that take no talent. You have to eliminate all loafs. Like, if you loaf on the field, you're a traitor. Like, you should just go play for the other team. Like, we can't be coaching effort. And then you can't have mental errors, because if you have a mental error, then you can't trust you. So those were the 2 things that I always, as a player, was like, all right, you're not going to catch me loafing, and you're definitely not going to catch me not knowing what I'm supposed to do. I might get beat. I mean, that's inevitable. It's football. Everyone's on scholarship, right? But those 2 things you can control every single day.
Laurinaitis went from grad assistant to full-time linebackers coach this offseason, and one of the biggest changes there is that he can now go on the road in recruiting. He's a much bigger part of the Buckeyes' recruiting efforts now than he was a year ago. Now, he can't talk about any specific recruits before any of those guys signs, but just more broadly speaking, looking at the recruiting end of his job, how is he enjoying that expanded role?
I am enjoying it. I think it's fun to build relationships and get to know so many different types of kids, you know. Ohio State presents opportunity, right, in so many different ways. You're not going to get developed better anywhere else in the country. We have the largest fan base, the largest alumni. I mean, it's just opportunity everywhere, right? So you try to just explain your passion for the school that did so much for you, you know, especially being an out-of-state kid, not being from Ohio, and then realizing how much Ohio State changed my life. And so now you communicate that to other young kids who kind of see it, and you try to tell them the vision, like where you can get to. And I think the fun thing for me is that most of the kids I'm recruiting are way more athletic than I ever was. So it's like, I tell them, the only way I survived in the NFL 8 years was the fact that I had football intelligence. Like, I knew where I was going. You know what I mean? I knew where I was fitting. And so now if I can impart that information on kids who are extremely athletic, well, now you got something special. You know what I mean?
Some of those recruits may have more athleticism than Laurinaitis did as a player, but few can match the mentality and intensity that he brought to the game as a player. So how do you coach players who might have a different mixture of those traits than he maybe did?
Well, you figure that out when you get to know them. And there are certainly some kids that you start to recruit to where you see, like, you know what? Ohio State might be too big. It might be too big for them. You know what I mean? And so it's not for everybody. You have to want to come in and compete against the best and realize that you have to win every single game and be the best in the world at what you do. That's the expectations at Ohio State. And that's certainly not for everyone, and that's okay. But you have to, through the process, kind of find out who has that mentality, who really craves football. You know, like who craves football versus a lot of the other fluff that kind of comes with it. Who craves ball? Because if they crave football, then the other stuff will take care of itself, right? And we'll just keep getting better and better and better if they want to be the best.
Talked earlier about some of the younger guys who might be taking in a bigger role this year. Arvell Reese is certainly one of them. He's just entering his second year, and he had kind of a weird first season with the Buckeyes, got moved around a little bit to the defensive line and back to the linebackers, and also missed time with an injury. So where is Arvell Reese right now in his progression?
Arvell's, shown a lot of progress, most importantly, mentally with the playbook and everything. I think Arvell, last year there was a couple things, right? Because of injuries on the D-line in camp, he moved to end for a little bit, and then we brought him off the ball, and then he had an injury, and he kind of missed some time. He wasn't an early mid-year, so he comes in right in the summer, and so he misses some reps there. So to see where he's at right now is extremely impressive. And for a guy of that size and that much power and his ability to run, he's a special athlete. And so Arvell's had a good spring. He's got to continue to dive into the playbook and got to continue to learn all the little things. And as you go, right, like week 1, week 2, you start seeing new schemes, things build, and it becomes kind of a lot. He's just got to continue to comb through it all because athletically, he's one of the most gifted guys that we have in the room.
It has been quite a while since James Laurinaitis was a high school recruit, and so even though he's had that experience of being recruited to Ohio State and playing at Ohio State, are things just completely different in recruiting now than they were when he was coming out of high school?
No, I think it still comes down for the most part. Like NIL is certainly an aspect for some. For some, it's going to be the most important thing. It's always a factor. But I think you still just need to find out who are the kids that love football and they want to be developed. And it's about the relationship to an extent. Like a relationship gets you to the final stretch. For some kids, NIL might be the thing that pushes them over the top. I don't know. Like every kid is so different, right? I try to view it as you're just building relationships, and are you going to get a young man to trust you to develop them into not only the player that they want to be, but the person that they want to be in the future? And can you convince mom and dad that you're the right person to do that? You know what I mean? So I think one of the things that is helpful is my playing experience. I think, when you've played and you've done it and the drills that you're doing, you know that they work. You're not going to waste your time on stuff that doesn't work. And then the fact that, I'm blessed to be at my alma mater, so there's no sense of trying to leave here. You know what I mean? That's a question I get a ton is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I'm like, where I'm sitting. It's my alma mater. My kids love it in Columbus. Obviously, I love Ohio State. So I think those are things that can kind of be an advantage.
And finally, one of the big changes to the coaching staff after last season was Parker Fleming, the special teams coordinator, was not retained at the end of last season. And the Buckeyes did not bring in another full-time special teams coordinator. So that means that the special teams jobs, kickoff and kickoff coverage and kickoff return and punts and punt coverage and punt returns, those are all getting divided up among the other assistant coaches. So what has that been like for Laurinaitis to be working with the special teams now?
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it because it gives you an opportunity to coach the whole team. You know what I mean? Like special teams is a spot where the whole team, probably minus the quarterbacks, right, is all in one team room, in one meeting room. So you get to actually directly impact other positions than just your own. And I think it also gives a little bit of urgency to your own room. Like when you're in there every single time, you better be making an impact on punt. If you're a linebacker, you better be making an impact on kick return or on kickoff return, punt return, all those things. You better be making an impact, right? Because your coach is in there all the time. So it's been nice. And there's a lot of stuff that I think our coaches have done to kind of push that sense of team when you're in special teams, that every position matters.
Well, we will have a very busy week this week, counting down the days to the Ohio State spring game. That is Saturday, noon, April 13th, televised on Fox. Tickets available. Forecast so far looking pretty darn good. Looks like it should be a very nice day to be out at the Horseshoe. We will be out there, and if you're out there, do say hi to us. And if you're not out there, well, make sure you check us out at BuckeyeHuddle.com and YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. We will have plenty of coverage of what should be a very interesting, very informative Ohio State spring game coming up on Saturday. Make sure you're subscribed in our YouTube channel, youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. Make sure you're subscribed to BuckeyeHuddle.com as well. We got lots of coverage of what's going on with the team, what's going on with recruiting, and much, much more, plus a very active and fun board presented by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.